In a small fishing village lost among the endless snows, the sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, painting the icy expanse in soft shades of pink and blue. Liam and Emily, brother and sister, played by the frozen shore, leaving a trail of footprints in the crisp snow. Their laughter echoed across the empty land, breaking the silence of the winter day. But suddenly, Liam stopped, staring at the snow. He crouched down and traced his finger along a strange track, a long, uneven mark as if something large had been dragged across the ice. Looking toward the frozen coastline, he noticed something unusual, a faint movement against the whiteness. "Emily, look," he whispered, pointing ahead. The children cautiously moved toward the source of the motion. Soon, a sight unfolded before them that made their hearts clench. A young polar bear lay entangled in fishing nets, struggling weakly. The bear looked thin, its thick fur stained, and its usually bright, lively eyes were dull. It barely moved, and each attempt to free itself only tightened the knots around it. Emily grabbed her brother's hand. "Liam, we have to help." He nodded, realizing they couldn't do it alone. The children turned and ran back toward the village, their breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. They dashed into the village square, where fishermen were finishing their winter preparations. "There's a bear. It's trapped in the nets. It might die," Liam shouted, trying to catch his breath. The fishermen exchanged glances. One of them, an elderly man with a thick beard, chuckled. "A polar bear? Kids, you must be mistaken. They survive on their own. Don't worry. But he's weak. He won't make it," Emily pleaded. The fishermen just shook their heads and returned to their work. Disappointed but determined, Liam and Emily knew exactly who to turn to. They ran to Anna's house, the village biologist who worked at the local wildlife research center. Anna opened the door and, seeing their worried faces, immediately asked, "What happened?" "A bear," Liam panted. "It's trapped in nets near the shore. It needs help." Anna wasted no time. She contacted a team of ecologists, and together with the children, they set off toward the trapped animal. The cold wind bit at their faces, but Liam and Emily ignored it. Their only thought was to save the bear. When they arrived, Anna frowned. The ice beneath the bear looked unstable, and the animal had nearly stopped struggling. Time was running out, and every moment counted. The bear panted, shivering from the cold and exhaustion. Barely managing to stay on its feet, it slowly rose, taking an unsteady step onto the fragile ice. Everyone held their breath. Time seemed to stand still. Liam lay on the snow, shaking from the cold and shock. His fingers were numb, his breath uneven, but his eyes never left the bear. Emily sat beside him, gripping his shoulder tightly as if afraid he might disappear like the ice that had betrayed him moments ago. Anna approached the children, wrapping Liam in a thermal blanket and holding him close. "It's okay. You did great," she whispered, looking into his eyes. The bear paused. Its large dark eyes met Liam's. There was no fear or aggression in its gaze, only exhaustion and silent acknowledgement. It lingered for a moment, then, with one last effort, moved forward and vanished into the snowy mist. "He's gone," Emily whispered. No one spoke. They stood in silence, letting the moment sink deep into their hearts. Then, the rush began. Rescuers helped Liam up, covering him with more blankets and placing him in a snowmobile. Emily never left his side, her eyes still glistening with tears. Back home, warmth surrounded them. The scent of hot tea and burning wood filled the air. Their mother held them tightly, saying nothing. Their father shook Anna's hand firmly, gratitude evident in his expression. The fisherman, who had doubted the children, now looked at them with newfound respect. One of them, old John, shook his head thoughtfully. "We've always left our nets without thinking," he finally said. "Never considered it could cost a life. That won't happen again." The other fishermen nodded in agreement. A small act of bravery from two children had changed the mindset of an entire village. Months passed. Winter loosened its grip, and the sun once again painted the icy landscape in golden light. Liam and Emily played by the shore, skipping stones across the frozen surface and watching them slide. "Do you think he's out there?" Emily asked, gazing into the distance. Liam didn't answer, but deep down, he felt their story wasn't over. Suddenly, Emily gasped and pointed toward the horizon. Against the white landscape, a massive figure stood still, watching them. The bear. Liam froze. He couldn't be sure if it was the same bear they had saved, but at that moment it didn't matter. Warmth spread through his chest, and he smiled. The bear lingered for a moment, then, with a slight nod, turned and disappeared into the ice. Liam inhaled the crisp air and squeezed his sister's hand. He remembers. Emily smiled. They stood together, watching the empty horizon, knowing their encounter had not been in vain. Liam and Emily, along with Anna and the rescue team, reached the shore where a difficult challenge awaited them. The polar bear lay on a drifting ice floe, tangled in fishing nets. Its breath was heavy, its body motionless. Time was slipping away, and the children felt the urgency of every passing second. The rescuers approached carefully, trying not to frighten the bear. They began cutting the nets, but the situation grew more dangerous. Under their weight, the ice started to crack. Every step could be their last. "We need to hurry," Anna murmured, watching the cracks spreading across the ice. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air. The ice beneath the bear gave way, and it began to slip into the freezing water. Alarmed shouts filled the air. The ecologists desperately tried to hold on to the animal, but its weight and weakened state made it impossible to climb back onto the ice. Emily squeezed her brother's hand. Liam, without hesitation, grabbed a nearby rope and rushed forward. "Liam, stop," his sister cried, but he was already crawling across the ice, ignoring the danger. The ice groaned beneath him, but he kept going. With trembling hands, he tossed the rope around the bear's neck, secured it tightly, and shouted, "Pull!" The rescuers grabbed the rope and began pulling. Slowly, with great effort, they dragged the exhausted animal onto the ice. Then, another loud crack shattered the air. Liam felt the ice beneath him collapse. He plunged into the freezing water. "Liam!" Emily screamed. Anna and one of the rescuers rushed to him. The icy water gripped his body instantly, stealing his breath. He struggled to grab the edge of the ice, but his hands kept slipping against the wet snow. Anna seized his jacket just as the ice beneath her began to sink. Holding on tightly, she and the rescuer managed to haul Liam onto solid ground. The boy shivered, his face pale, but he was alive. At that moment, the bear finally freed itself onto the ice. Emily ran to her brother, wrapping her arms around him, her hands trembling. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Liam barely managed a nod. "That was incredible," Anna murmured, wrapping her scarf around the boy. "You saved him, Liam." He felt exhaustion and cold weighing on him, but inside, warmth spread through his heart. He knew it had all been worth it.
The Gardner family loved spending their weekends in nature, far from the noise of the city. This time, they decided to go to a lake that, every winter, was covered by a thick layer of ice. Their home was filled with warmth and coziness, and as they got into the car to head to the lake, a crisp freshness of the upcoming adventure lingered in the air. Little Toby, barely waiting for the car to park, jumped out, leaped onto the thick snow, and froze for a moment as if absorbing the full power of the winter day. The sun shone low on the horizon, casting golden rays onto the ice's reflective surface, and everything around was bathed in a quiet glow. His mother, Laura, stood on the shore, adjusting her scarf around her shoulders, smiling as she watched her son, her gaze filled with both joy and caution. "Toby, don't go too far," she warned. "The ice can be dangerous." The boy, ignoring his mother's words, ran forward, feeling as if the icy surface beneath his feet was inviting him into the unknown. He went farther and farther, laughing, until he reached the middle of the lake. Laura felt a sudden wave of unease. Her heart clenched with anxiety, but she couldn't take her eyes off her son. "Not too far," she called out again, but Toby only waved his arms, shouting something indistinct in excitement. And then, as if in slow motion, the ice beneath his feet cracked. First, there was a faint clicking sound, then a deep vibration spread across the lake. Toby froze, not immediately understanding what had happened. Then the ice gave way, and he disappeared into the water. "Toby!" Laura screamed, her voice losing all strength, turning into a desperate cry. She rushed toward him, but the ice seemed to stretch and break beneath her feet, its cracks widening as if some invisible force was pulling her into the abyss. Dan, Toby's father, jumped up and ran after her. He prayed he would be fast enough, but with each step, the ice became more fragile. They got close enough to see Toby struggling in the freezing water, trying to climb out, but failing. And then, something incredible happened. Out of nowhere, from the forest by the shore, a dog appeared. It was thin, covered in thick but frost-covered fur, and its eyes burned with determination. Without hesitation, the dog leaped into the icy water. Despite the freezing cold and the terror of the moment, it swam toward Toby. The entire scene, filled with tension and desperation, unfolded in mere seconds. Laura and Dan held their breath as they watched the dog battle the freezing water and ice, reaching Toby and gripping his clothes with its teeth. With immense effort, it pulled him onto the ice. Fearless and determined, the dog dragged Toby toward the shore. As soon as Toby reached solid ground, Dan rushed to him, lifting him into his arms. The boy was trembling violently, his face pale, lips turning blue. Without hesitation, Dan carried him toward the car. Laura walked beside them, wrapping her coat around her son, unable to hold back her tears. "Is he okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. Toby, barely conscious, barely moved. The dog, wasting no time, scrambled off the ice and ran to the car. Laura turned in surprise but didn't stop it. The dog jumped inside and started licking Toby's face, trying to bring him back. It was cold, covered in frost, but its love and care were genuine, and that made all the difference. Despite his weakness, Toby felt a strange warmth from the stray dog that had become his savior. The ride home was silent. Dan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his thoughts scattered, filled with regret. "We could have lost him, Laura," he said, unable to hide his guilt. Laura only nodded, but her gaze was fixed not on her husband, but on their son, who was still shivering in the back seat. She wrapped her arms around him, trying to warm him. "I couldn't have stopped him," she whispered. Toby opened his eyes, saw his mother, and quietly said, "Mom, the dog saved me. It just jumped into the water and pulled me out. I don't want it to leave." Laura held back tears. She looked at the dog, which sat there as if sensing the importance of the moment. It was a stray, with no collar, but now it was a hero who had saved their son. Time would prove that its presence was no mere coincidence. When they arrived home, Toby felt the weight of what had happened, realizing how different the outcome could have been. He was grateful, and in his eyes burned a new understanding. Life was entirely at the mercy of chance, but in that uncertainty, there was room not just for fear, but for kindness. "We have to keep her," Toby said, looking at the dog, which had settled into a corner. "She saved me. We can't let her go." Dan and Laura exchanged glances, their hearts heavy, but they knew that no fear could outweigh the feeling they had in that moment. The dog had become part of their family, and with that decision came not just gratitude but a lesson that every moment matters, every life is precious, and love should be given freely, just like the dog had done, without conditions. Toby fell asleep in their embrace, and the dog, resting its head quietly on his pillow, stayed by his side like a loyal friend, ready to protect him at any moment. And that day was not just a day of rescue, it was the beginning of a new story of love and life.